Good afternoon, members of the media. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, where we're going to be addressed by the Acting Commissioner of Police, Mr. Darren Simons, and he's going to be addressing the issue of knife crime. I know that there are two matters that you would be interested in hearing about which occurred last evening. I want to ask that you not ask any questions about those incidents during this press conference. We're going to be issuing a statement later on today. Mr. Simons?
Thank you very much, Mr. Rainio, and good afternoon, Bermuda. I've got a prepared statement, and then after that, I'll be happy to entertain some questions, to take some questions. The Bermuda Police Service has noticed what appears to be an uptick in violent incidents involving the use of bladed articles. In the past 12 months, there have been 13 such incidents, 3 of which have resulted in death. Another stabbing incident just 2 weeks ago could have had a similar outcome. The victim in that matter, a 14-year-old male who at the time was on his way to school, continues to recover from injuries sustained in what can only be described as a brutal attack. Meanwhile, a 35-year-old male is currently in the intensive care unit at KMH with what are considered to be potentially life-threatening injuries after being stabbed during an incident which occurred on Glebe Road, Pembroke, shortly before midnight last night. What we have observed is that individuals are arming themselves with a knife or knives out of potential concern or fear for themselves, potentially being set upon. However, carrying a knife increases the risk of you becoming more involved in a dangerous situation rather than protecting you from one. The safest thing to do if you're threatened is to move away from the threat, to distance yourself from any opportunity to get involved in a fight or anything similar to that. The reality is that access to a knife or any other bladed article is ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They're readily available in every home. But it's when these items are used for nefarious purposes that the issues arise. As a reminder, or for those who are not aware, under Section 315F of the Criminal Code, any person who without lawful authority or reasonable excuse has in his possession in any public place any offensive weapon shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, and on summary conviction to imprisonment for 2 years or a fine of $1,500 or both. And if it's on indictment, you could be liable up to a period of imprisonment for 4 years or to a fine of $5,000 or both. Under Section 315F of the Criminal Code, police officers have the authority to stop and search any individual they suspect of carrying a bladed article. I cannot overstate our position that we will use all means available to us to end this and any other form of criminal activity as we seek to meet our mandate of making Bermuda safer. And this will obviously include utilizing our powers of stop and search. We ask that members of the public who work with knives, gardening tools, or other items that may be deemed a weapon to leave these items at work or immediately take them home upon completion of work. It will not be an excuse at 3 a.m. in the morning to say that the machete you were just caught with is the one you're using to trim trees or that you just knocked off work. We've heard it all before, and these claims are easy for us to investigate. We urge parents to be aware of what their children are up to and where they are and with whom they're hanging out. If you can, be aware of what items your kids are leaving the house with and take note of anything that could be deemed a weapon as previously described. If you feel threatened, do not arm yourself. Report your concern to someone in authority, whether that person be a parent, a caregiver, or some other adult, or obviously the police. You can call 211, the main police number at 295-0011, or speak with any police officer that you're familiar with. We're here to help. Thank you very much, and I would entertain some questions.
Madam Commissioner, thank you so much. Just one question. You mentioned that the police have a right to stop and search. Does that mean you're going to be, because of these increasing instances of people carrying knives, you're going to be doing more stop and searches? And also, could you explain, do you have to have good cause to stop and search somebody, or can you just now, because of this increase in instance, just start stopping and searching people at random?
Okay, so there's two questions. Are we going to be increasing our stop and searches? So we've increased our level of engagement significantly as a result of some of the uptick we've seen in violence and the shooting incidents that we have. So we are very much out there in the community interdicting and doing stopping and searching. So I think levels are not necessarily going to increase as a result of this incident. What I'm saying is we're out there doing it already. And in terms of how the stop and search powers is utilized, that is once the authority has been given to exercise 315F, the officers do not need reasonable grounds in the circumstances. So the authority is given for an area for a period of time, and officers have the ability to stop and search anyone in that locale in order to prevent violence.
Do you think that we're now going to see more officers on the street through this initiative in any particularly given area at one time? And also, do you think that's something that the public will appreciate? Because there's often talk about, well, the police don't really tackle certain crimes. They're in the office doing the paperwork all the time, and you don't see officers on the street. So do you think we will have more officers, and that's something that will reassure the public?
So there has very much been a surge, if you'd like, in police officer presence. You see that particularly around Operation Vega. It's definitely one of the areas that you see that. But in and amongst all that, there's definitely targeted operations that are occurring all the time. In fact, one of the impacts which we shared with the public is that we had to bring parish officers off of their sort of what their general duties are and onto the watch, so that officers that were taken from the watch, deployed to those frontline enforcement activities, the parish constables would backfill that kind of post. So absolutely, we're out there doing it. The public should be reassured by our presence, and they would have undoubtedly seen an uptick in police officers and police officer activity recently. The reality is the public are reassured by the presence of the police, and we want to be intelligence-led in our deployment of our officers so that we can meet the crime demands and reassure the public and build community confidence around our presence.
And it's more a case of, if you can nip it in the bud, then that's far better than waiting until an incident happens and then trying to solve it.
Absolutely, and actually, thank you for that little segue, because I think there are, the police have a definite role to play when the pot boils over, right? And in response to incidents. But I would definitely take this time to sort of underscore the fact that as a community, we need to look at what causes violence. Violence is a social ill that happens to be a crime, and it requires the community and it requires social intervention to fundamentally change the dynamic that brings about violence. Think about it as this, right? So the police, when the pot boils over and it spills all out on the ground, the police have got to mop up the mess. Right? We think about a pot, or we think about a tap that's running. If nobody turns off the tap or turns off the stove, we'll be in this constant cycle of having to mop up a mess. So the police have a very clear role in the community in terms of cleaning up the mess, trying to restore some immediate calm and building confidence in the community. But the community has got to get behind what are the causes and social ills to violence so that we can stop the continuous cycle.
And Commissioner, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Acting Commissioner, how could I put it? At one point there were 3 inches that were legal, and anything over 3 inches. What is the exact length of blade?
I believe
because I asked. Why I asked that is because I'm seeing individuals that would have a bladed article at 2 inches and 2 3/4 inches.
Right. So possession of an article, and I'm going to say it's 3 inches, right? I'm not exactly sure, but possession of an article over 3 inches is automatically an offense. But possession of a pocket knife with less than 3 inches, and you're using it in a nefarious or unlawful criminal kind of way, will create an offense of possession or use of an offensive weapon. So if a legitimate pocket knife is simply in your pocket and you're carrying and walking around with a folding pocket knife, that wouldn't be in and of itself. But a lock blade with a blade length of 3 inches or more would in itself constitute an offense.
There's a lot of individuals that walk around with box cutters. How do U.S. police handle those type of issues?
So, I mean, the challenge around bladed articles is that these items have legitimate, legitimate uses. So, the possession of a box cutter in a public place, in and of itself, is probably not going to generate an immediate offense. But when you start to use that box cutter for things other than cutting boxes or to cut people, then that would become an offense. Yeah.
Another question I'm going to ask is outside of this press conference, if it's okay. You've been acting commissioner for quite a while.
Yeah. That's
Any
okay.
any news of when a new commissioner will be announced? Be it yourself, maybe.
So the process is the governor's.
Mm-hmm.
The process is ongoing, and we would all be hopeful that we would be in a position to announce the appointment of a new commissioner in the near future.
Any other questions, members of the media?
Cheers.
All right. Thank you very much.